Chapter 9, Queen of Nightmares. Rimuru's POV. I took a casual sip of tea from my cup, sitting with my legs crossed and my posture relaxed. As I waited for Hinata's response, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Call it a hunch, but I had a gut feeling she was somehow connected to my fellow demon lord, Luminous Valentine. I had no proof, but luckily, it seems my intuition was correct. Hinata, on the other hand, looked genuinely surprised. She seemed to be contemplating something deeply, as if my request had taken her off guard. After a brief moment, she finally spoke, her voice slightly strained, as though she was still processing what I'd asked. Sorry for spacing out there. I'm still surprised you knew, she apologized, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. No need to apologize, I said with a nonchalant shrug. I just had a good hunch. No big deal. She seemed to relax at my easygoing response, though there was still a glimmer of unease in her eyes. After a short pause, she gave me a slight nod. I see. Well, if that's the favor you're asking for, I can send the message directly. When would you like to meet? She asked, her tone more composed now, though I could tell the matter was still on her mind. Whenever she's free. I'm not in a rush, I replied with a smile. Thanks, Hinata. I appreciate it. With the matter settled, we both stood up. She gave me a respectful bow before walking off toward her room in the inn, and I headed out. I wasn't in a hurry, but decided to warp back home. A moment later, I found myself in the familiar living room of my home. I looked around and immediately spotted Veldora sprawled out on the couch, a manga in hand. Typical. He didn't even notice me enter. I decided not to disturb him, heading upstairs instead. As I reached the door to my room, I noticed something unusual. Lying on my bed, on her stomach, was Velzard, seemingly absorbed in a romance manga. Really? What was going on with dragons and reading manga? Had Velzard learned to tease me from these books? Or was this just part of her nature? And what in the world was she doing in my room? She instantly noticed me and placed the book aside before gracefully standing up, flashing a warm smile. Good evening, Rimuru-kun, she greeted me, her voice laced with a subtle, teasing undertone. I froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Good evening, Velz-chan. What are you doing in my room? I asked, my voice betraying a little nervousness. Velzard's smile deepened into something more mischievous. I just thought I'd check it out. Your room is very comfortable, you know? You wouldn't mind if I slept here, right? She asked, her tone playfully teasing. What the hell? Did she really just ask me that? In an instant, my face flushed bright red, and Velzard let out a soft giggle, clearly enjoying my reaction. Her teasing had been steadily escalating, but this was on another level entirely. What? I mean, I wouldn't mind. Wait, no. I sputtered, my mind racing to retract my words as I waved my hands frantically. Great. Way to go, me. You're making things way worse. Velzard leaned closer, her expression playfully smug. Which is it, Rimuru-kun? Do you mind, or do you not? She pressed further, and I panicked. What the hell should I say? Why in the world did she want to sleep with me tonight? Okay, deep breath. Maybe it's not that bad. It's just one night, right? Just sleeping. No big deal. Fine, but just this one night. I managed, though my face was still burning up. Velzard's eyes sparkled as she gave me a teasing smile. We shall see, Rimuru-kun, she said smugly. I could only shake my head, feeling utterly helpless as I followed her lead. We dimmed the lights and settled into bed, lying side by side. The room was enveloped in a comfortable silence, and I focused on the steady rhythm of our breathing. Rimuru-kun, Velzard began softly, breaking the silence. This is quite peaceful. Yeah, it really is, I replied. We turned to face each other, both lying on our sides now. The room was dark, but I could still make out her face, her features somehow even more ethereal in the shadows. I couldn't help but admire her beauty, feeling my heart beat a little faster as I stared at her. But when I looked up, I noticed that Velzard, too, seemed a little flushed. Her appearance in the dim light was almost endearing, and her beauty was absolutely captivating. So, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her grin returning. Would you like it if I slept with you like this every night? This woman, could she be any bolder? I'll think about it. Hey, anyway, we should sleep now. It's getting late. Good night, Velzard. I mumbled, my voice as soft as I could make it. Velzard giggled in response, her laughter light and teasing. Good night, Rimuru. And then, just when I thought I might finally escape this insane situation, she leaned closer and kissed my forehead, a soft, lingering gesture. My entire body went stiff as I tried to process what just happened. My face was probably glowing like a lantern as I buried it into my pillow, too flustered to look up. Velzard's giggles only made it worse, though there was a sweetness in her laughter that melted away some of the awkwardness. Minutes passed, and my heart gradually slowed, the burning sensation on my face subsiding. Eventually, I managed to drift off to sleep, though the image of Velzard's teasing grin would linger in my mind for a long time. Third-person POV. The sun had risen the next day, casting a golden light over the rolling hills of Tempest. The air was crisp, and the skies were clear. It was a perfect morning to bid farewell. The 10 great saints, their mission completed, were now preparing to depart. Their brief but eventful stay in Tempest had been an eye-opening experience. They had taken the opportunity to explore the vibrant nation, sampling local delicacies and marveling at the variety of goods Tempest offered. It was a far cry from the rigid, monolithic life they were accustomed to back in Lobelia. Rimuru, ever the gracious host, had offered to warp them back to their homeland. The saints, with a collective nod, humbly declined. They valued the journey as a way to reflect on their experiences and clear their minds after encountering the tense and surprising revelations. After some final pleasantries and goodbyes, the group set off toward Lobelia, the winding path ahead of them now stretching out peacefully beneath the golden morning sun. The journey was much quieter than their arrival had been. The days passed with little incident. For the saints, each step away from Tempest brought them back to the reality of their mission, but it also rekindled the conflicts simmering within them. The decree from the church had been drummed into them for years. It was a simple doctrine, clear and absolute. Humanity and monsters were enemies by nature. But Tempest had upended that notion. The creatures there, led by Rimuru, were not the bloodthirsty beasts their church had taught them to fear. They were intelligent, capable, and, most surprisingly, kind. Each of the saints wrestled with this dissonance in their own way. Some had grown disillusioned with the teachings of their church. In contrast, others held on to their duty, though with increasing difficulty. Their leader, Hinata, however, had already come to terms with the truth. As the one who bore the most significant responsibility for their actions, she understood more than most that the church's doctrine was not as absolute as it appeared. After all, she knew the truth about their so-called God, a demon lord playing a much more significant role in shaping the world than they could have imagined. As they journeyed onward, the sacred mountain of Lobelia came into view. Their destination was nearing, but Hinata's mind was elsewhere. She could feel the weight of her next task pressing on her. Her steps quickened as they reached the gates of the capital. Without hesitation, she went to the holy church that loomed over the city like a silent sentinel. Her heart beat a little faster as she ascended the steps to the church's massive entrance. Even now, the sight of the sacred grounds still held power over her. Inside, it was as majestic as ever, but Hinata was not here for reflection or prayer. She had a task to complete. After a brief exchange with Lewis, who welcomed her back, Hinata made her way deeper into the heart of the church. Past the quiet corridors and ornate chambers, she reached the inner sanctum. The air was thick with a sense of solemnity, but it was here, within the sanctum's cool stone walls, that she would deliver the message Rimuru had asked her to carry. She paused momentarily before pushing open the heavy door, her mind steeling itself for the meeting ahead. Inside, luminous Valentine lay comfortably on a plush couch, her ever-present calmness belying the intensity of her position. The demon lord was a picture of tranquility, her heterochromatic eyes gleaming in the dim light. She looked up as Hinata entered, a small smile tugging at her lips. Hinata, I believe you wanted to tell me something. You now have my permission to speak, I began, shifting my gaze to her. Hinata paused momentarily, but she composed herself before speaking. Why yes, your fellow demon lord, Rimuru Tempest, are requested to have an audience with you. He wished to discuss a peace treaty between Libelius and his nation. A peace treaty with Rimuru, huh? I hummed, shifting into a thoughtful pose as I considered the offer. Despite the Holy Church's decree, the reality of Rimuru's power was undeniable. His victory over Clayman confirmed what I had initially suspected. Beyond that, the fact that he kept that damn storm dragon in check was perhaps the most significant detail. As much as the presence of that lizard in Tempest irked me, knowing that his sister was nearby gave me a sense of reassurance. I had no doubt she'd keep Veldora in line. The exchange of technology, knowledge, and culture between our nations could only be a boon. A treaty with Tempest would greatly benefit Libelius. Sure, when does Rimuru want to meet up? I asked, my voice still casual, though my mind was already running through the possibilities. Hinata hesitated for just a beat, clearly not expecting such a swift response from me, but soon regained her composure. He said he's not in a rush, so whenever you're free is the best time, she answered, her tone still tentative. How considerate of him. All right then, we'll leave in 3 days. I'd like you to inform Lewis since he'll be accompanying us, I said, giving a warm but firm nod. Hinata's face shifted to one of confusion and surprise. I'll be going as well. But I just visited Tempest recently. It'll be strange to return so soon, she muttered, her discomfort palpable. A smirk tugged at the corner of my lips as I watched her flustered reaction. Of course, Hinata-chan. What would I do without my right-hand woman? Don't forget to inform Lewis about the meeting when you leave, all right? I told her, my voice softening with each word. Hinata nodded quickly, still blushing, but her words were shy. Right away, Luminous-sama, she affirmed. I snapped my fingers, and the moment was gone. The spell I had cast to clean us both worked instantly, the last traces of our encounter evaporating into nothingness. Sinking back onto the couch, I closed my eyes, my thoughts drifting to the events ahead. A peace treaty with Rimuru, and more moments like this one with Hinata. The future was looking promising indeed. Rimuru's POV. It had been a week since Hinata and her team had left Tempest, and the day was just beginning to settle into its rhythm. I found myself sifting through a list of proposed projects for the country, trying to decide which ones to approve or deny. Velzard stood beside me, occasionally offering her thoughts or suggestions, making the process smoother. Honestly, Velzard was starting to feel more like my secretary than Cheyenne or Diablo. But then again, Diablo was terrifyingly competent at his job, so much so that Cheyenne seemed to be slipping into the background. As I glanced over the construction proposals, my mind began to wander. A thought suddenly struck me, and an idea blossomed. The Colosseum. I'd visited it during my past life, and the sheer scale and history of the structure had always left an impression. It was a feat of engineering that still stood the test of time. Tempest had already adopted some Roman-inspired aqueducts, so why not take it a step further? The Colosseum could serve many purposes. It could host tournaments and large gatherings for public speeches, and even serve as a battleground for training or sparring matches. Velzard, I've got it, I exclaimed, my excitement practically bubbling over. She glanced at me with curiosity, sensing the change in my demeanor. You seem excited. What's going through your mind? She asked, a teasing note to her voice. There's this incredible structure from my previous world I want to rebuild here in Tempest. The Great Colosseum, I said, practically beaming with enthusiasm. She tilted her head, intrigued but clearly confused. Colosseum? I'm afraid I don't know what that is. Could you show me what it looks like? She requested. Sure thing, I replied, grinning as I projected an image of my visit to Rome into her mind. Her eyes widened as she took in the grandeur of the ancient structure. That's incredible, and the scale is massive, she murmured, unable to hide her astonishment. I know, right? I exclaimed. Just imagine what we could do with a structure like that. Tournaments, public announcements to the people, and even a great battleground for sparring practices. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and she grinned. That does sound incredibly exciting. I definitely approve of this project, she said. I couldn't help but grin back at her. Her approval meant a lot, and it was all the confirmation I needed. Yo, Gelt, I sent a thought communication, feeling a rush of inspiration. Ah, Rimuru-sama. It's good to hear from you. What's on your mind? Came his calm voice. I've got an idea for a new project, but before I go into it, are you busy right now? I asked. Not at all. The progress of the new construction workers has been excellent, especially since Velzard-sama announced her stay here. Her presence seems to have given them the push they needed, Geld replied, his tone light and humorous. Ha, I guess that's true. Anyway, since you're free, could you come to the capital? Also, bring Kaijin and the other dwarves along. I'd like their input on something, I requested. Understood, Rimuru-sama. We'll be there shortly, he affirmed. Third-person POV. Rimuru gathered his brightest subordinates in engineering and architectural design to discuss his ambitious project of building a massive stadium in Tempest. The structure scale was awe-inspiring, but the team quickly realized that with only a few ongoing construction projects, they had more than enough workforce to dedicate to this new endeavor. Despite the colossal size of the project, the construction would progress faster than expected. As they worked on the initial blueprints, it became clear that to support such a massive structure, they would need to excavate a substantial portion of the ground to create a solid, artificial foundation. Luckily, Rimuru's ultimate skill, God of the Void, Azathoth, made this task trivial. Carving out vast chunks of earth was as effortless as breathing, and the project's logistical challenges were resolved. The team was ready to begin finalizing the blueprint and laying out the groundwork. Construction was set to start soon, bringing Rimuru's vision to life. Meanwhile, Kaijin was surprised when Rimuru offered him a skill. At first, Kaijin humbly declined, but Rimuru insisted, emphasizing that it would only enhance the quality of life in Tempest. Grateful for the gesture, Kaijin reluctantly accepted. The skill bestowed upon him was Engineer, a unique skill created through Rimuru's skill creation from Shub Nigurath. The skill came with 4 sub-skills. All of Creation. Design Integrity helps the user analyze a structure to optimize its integrity while maintaining the intended design. Enhanced Calculation enables the user to perform lightning-fast numerical calculations and perfect recall of mathematical formulas. Thought Acceleration. Although Engineer was a far cry from Great Sage, it was still instrumental in its own right. It lacked the ego of higher-tier skills, focusing instead on design and manual calculations, making it a perfect fit for Kaijin. He was deeply thankful to Rimuru for the gift. With the meeting concluded, Rimuru and Velzard headed home. Since Velzard had stopped sleeping in her own room, it had been converted into a second library tailored to her preferences for manga. Veldora, naturally, was upset about this. To appease him, Rimuru transformed the original library into a manga haven for Veldora, much to his delight. That evening, Rimuru and Velzard relaxed in his room, enjoying a tranquil moment together. On a whim, Rimuru decided to read manga with her, an act that made Velzard genuinely happy. They spent the rest of the evening immersed in a romantic comedy series called Kaguya-sama, Love is War. Velzard found the plot captivating, while Rimuru couldn't help but see parallels to his own relationship with her. The series told the story of 2 people who clearly liked each other but were too proud to confess their feelings. It was hard not to think of the unspoken tension between him and Velzard. By the time they finished the volume, the clock was nearing midnight. With a yawn, they said their goodnights and drifted off to sleep. Luminous, Hinata, and Lewis began their journey to Tempest the following day. Luminous had initially considered teleporting directly to their destination, but ultimately decided to travel by carriage instead. Her companions were confused, but chose not to question their master's decision. The journey was peaceful, far quieter than they had anticipated. Both Luminous and Lewis were surprised at the pristine condition of the roads and the noticeable lack of aggressive monsters. For Hinata, who had visited Tempest before, none of this was new. However, she was still impressed by how well-maintained everything was. The trip took over a week, and they finally arrived at the entrance to Tempest. The sight that greeted them was nothing short of breathtaking. The city was vibrant and alive with activity, and its citizens radiated a sense of happiness and peace. It was a far cry from the chaos they were accustomed to. Hinata led them to the Capitol building, where Rimuru awaited their arrival. She hoped he would offer them a tour of the city, allowing her to relive her incredible experiences during her previous visit and further immerse herself in Tempest's extraordinary commodities. Luminous POV. I had heard of Tempest's rapid growth, but seeing it with my own eyes was another matter entirely. I knew that Rimuru was a powerful individual and Tempest was an advancing nation, but the scale and quality of life here surpassed anything I could have anticipated. While not yet at the technological level of places like Lobilius or Ingracia, Tempest's citizens lived in an environment of peace and prosperity that far outstripped both. But what really blew my mind was the monsters. Every single one of them is named. I knew Rimuru was powerful, but this was ridiculous. Hinata also mentioned that she had dueled Rimuru during her visit just over a week ago. But calling it a duel felt almost wrong, as it seemed more like he was toying with her. I was initially shocked, but considering Rimuru's status as a true demon lord, her crushing defeat made perfect sense. Hinata even confessed, albeit reluctantly, that she wasn't sure I could win against him in a fair fight. I was slightly offended by that, but I held my tongue. I had witnessed his strength firsthand and knew better than to underestimate him. The move he used to absorb all of Clayman's attacks and then devour Clayman himself, that was undoubtedly the work of an ultimate skill. Just thinking about it made me bitter. Despite my evolution into a true demon lord and the thousands of years I've lived, I still hadn't acquired one. And yet, Rimuru, who'd only been around for 2 years, had already reached the pinnacle of skills. I couldn't help but feel a sharp pang of envy at his rapid ascent. But jealousy aside, I respected him deeply. After all, he was a demon lord. He might have lofty ideals, but unlike many others, he had the power to back them up. Lost in thought, I barely noticed that we had arrived at the capital. The building that greeted us was magnificent and imposing in structure, yet elegant and welcoming. A Goblina opened the door with a respectful bow, ushering us inside. Lewis and I were struck by its interior design. It was unlike anything we'd seen before. It was grand yet functional, stylish yet practical. The architecture spoke of a nation that was both thriving and thoughtful in its design choices. We found 3 figures waiting for us in the lobby, clearly anticipating our arrival. The center figure, of course, was Rimuru Tempest, my fellow demon lord. To his left was the red-haired Oni Hinata had mentioned. On his right stood a striking woman with long white hair styled in twin tails. We stopped a few meters away, and to my surprise, Hinata bowed deeply. "It's good to meet you again, Rimuru-san, Benimaru-san, and Velzard-sama," she greeted, her voice calm and respectful. I was taken aback, and Lewis, standing beside me, was visibly shocked. "V. Velzard-sama." Lewis gasped in surprise and, perhaps, a little horror. The woman beside Rimuru laughed softly, her voice carrying a note of amusement. "That would be me," she said, her tone soft but majestic. Instinctively, Lewis and I both bowed low, acknowledging her presence. "It is an honor to be in your presence, Velzard-sama," we said in unison. Velzard smiled, nodding in approval of our show of respect. Despite her serene demeanor, Velzard radiated an undeniable aura of majesty and power. I hadn't sensed it at first. To be honest, I thought she might have been just another human. But now, standing before her, I realized how foolish that assumption had been. The way she carried herself, her quiet elegance, and the sheer force of her presence were unmistakable. TCH, Rimuru is lucky to have such a beautiful woman by his side, but I knew better than to voice that sentiment aloud. Rimuru, in his typical cheerful manner, broke the tension. "Haraha, your reputation is really terrifying, Velz-chan. Anyway, how have you been, Hinata-san and Luminous-san? And nice to meet you, new person." Rimuru greeted with a wide grin. "I've been doing all right, Rimuru-san. Thanks for asking," Hinata replied, offering a polite, light bow. Rimuru then turned his attention to Lewis, who had stepped forward. "Pardon me, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Louis Valentine, Holy Emperor of Lobilius. It's an honor to meet you, Rimuru-san," Lewis said, his tone respectful but firm as he extended a hand for a handshake. "Oh, Nice to meet you, Lewis-san. Rimuru replied, shaking his hand firmly. He then turned his attention to me, smiling warmly. I'm doing quite well, thanks. Although I was rather surprised you requested me to be here, I remarked earnestly, a hint of curiosity in my voice. Rimuru chuckled softly at my comment. Well, I wanted to discuss a potential peace treaty and perhaps even diplomatic ties between our two nations, but this isn't really the place for such talks. He looked around, gesturing to the spacious lobby. I agree. Let's take our guests to the meeting hall, Rimuru-sama, the Oni suggested. All right then, everyone, let's go. Luminous-san, it's time to talk business. Chapter 10, A Spar Between Gods. Rimuru's POV. Once we settled into my office, everyone took their places with me behind my desk, Velzard and Benimaru flanking me, while Luminous, Lewis, and Hinata sat before us. Shuna arrived with freshly brewed tea and an assortment of delicate snacks. As we each took a sip, I noticed Luminous and Lewis perk up in delight. This tea is exceptional, Rimuru-san, Luminous praised, a smile breaking over her usually composed face. Lewis gave a firm nod of agreement. Indeed, Luminous-sama. You can thank Shuna for that. She's the best tea brewer in all of Tempest, I replied proudly, gesturing to her. Setting our cups down, we turned to the main topic. Luminous looked up, her expression calm but curious. So, Rimuru-san, you wanted to discuss establishing diplomatic relations with Libelius? She began, tilting her head slightly. Yes, I believe Tempest and Libelius could benefit greatly from cultural and technological exchanges. What are your thoughts on the matter? I asked. A grin spread across her face, and she let out a regal laugh. It seems we're on the same wavelength. That was exactly what I hoped to explore when I heard from Hinata, she replied. Her enthusiasm mirrored mine, making me feel we were on the right track. Great, I responded. There's just one concern lingering on my mind. I paused, and Luminous immediately picked up on it. The Western Church's decree, isn't it? The one labeling monsters as enemies of humanity, she asked. I nodded. Right. It's complicated. Changing it might stir some trouble. Luminous dismissed the notion with a wave of her hand. While the decree does complicate things, my word is final within the Western Holy Church. I could easily proclaim that the monsters in Tempest pose no threat. There will be some resistance, but ultimately, the nations will fall in line. Her confidence was unmistakable, and both Lewis and Hinata nodded in agreement. Relieved, I chuckled, slightly embarrassed. Maybe I was overthinking things. I murmured, my voice soft and low. Fufufu, honestly. You worry too much, Rimuru-kun, Velzard chimed in teasingly, and I shot her a sidelong look. Hey, I don't want to push coexistence on people by force. I'd like it to come naturally, I replied, a bit annoyed, making her smirk. Shaking my head, I returned my focus to Luminous. Since we're on the same page, shall we make it official? With pleasure. She extended her hand, and I shook it warmly. All right then, I said, taking out a formal-looking scroll from a box under my desk. Let's put this on record. Clearing my throat, I began to read. This treaty officially recognizes the diplomatic relations between the Jura Tempest Federation and the Holy Empire of Libelius. This alliance and partnership include peace between the two nations, the ability to engage in economic trade, assistance in times of crisis, and an exchange of technology and culture. This treaty shall remain indefinitely, except for unforeseen circumstances. May peace and prosperity grace both nations. I placed the scroll on the desk for everyone to see. After she reviewed it, Luminous nodded approvingly. We each signed the bottom, formally declaring our alliance. Rolling up the document, I placed it in a box and created a duplicate, handing one to her. It's a pleasure working with you, Luminous-san, I said, extending my hand again. Luminous laughed, her tone lighthearted. Drop the honorifics, Rimuru. We're both demon lords, aren't we? I grinned. Fair enough. And you can drop the formalities, too. With the business concluded, I noticed a glint of excitement in Hinata's eyes. Would you all be interested in a tour around Tempest later? I asked. Luminous exchanged a quick glance with Lewis and then nodded. That would be lovely. Lewis gave a respectful bow. We'd be grateful for it, Rimuru-san. All right then, I announced, practically bouncing in my seat. We'll start the tour right after I finish a spar with a certain someone. Everyone's attention snapped to me, curiosity piqued. Era? Who are you planning to spar with, Rimuru-kun? Velzard asked, arching an eyebrow. I grinned, raising a finger in the air with flair. Hee, none other than the storm dragon himself, Veldora, I declared with confidence, savoring the collective gasp that followed. Luminous looked as though she might choke on her tea. The storm dragon. You're actually going to spar with him? She yelled, unable to contain her shock. Velzard tilted her head, her gaze shifting to me thoughtfully. Era, so my little brother agreed to spar with you? I nodded, practically buzzing with energy. Yep. He didn't hesitate for a second. It's going to be legendary. Luminous, Hinata, and Lewis stared at me in pure disbelief, jaws hanging. Rimuru, Luminous stammered. I don't doubt your strength. In fact, it pains me to admit that you've surpassed me. But Veldora is a true dragon. True demon lords can hardly compare to them unless we're talking about Guy or Malim. Velzard chuckled softly, amusement flashing in her eyes. Don't underestimate Rimuru-kun, Luminous-san. While he may not be at the power of a true dragon, he's also far beyond your average true demon lord. I think he has a few tricks up his sleeve. I see, Hinata murmured, her gaze flickering with uncertainty. If I may, I have a question. I nodded, gesturing for her to go on. She swallowed before asking, between you and the storm dragon, who would win? I couldn't help the sly grin that spread across my face. This was the perfect setup. Looking her dead in the eyes, I replied with mock seriousness. Well, if he got serious, he might give me a bit of trouble. I paused, letting the tension hang. What would you lose? She pressed. I smirked, leaning back. Nah, I'd win. With that, I finally got to utter the famous quote. Their stunned silence was priceless. Luminous and Lewis blinked, seemingly lost for words, while Benimaru chuckled with a knowing smirk. Velzard gave my shoulder a gentle pat, a glint of amusement in her gaze. You seem confident, Rimuru-kun. Remember, while Veldora is no match for me, he is still a true dragon. You think you can take him? She questioned. I chuckled, clenching my fists. Let's just say I've got a solid 60 to 70% chance of winning. And besides, it's not a fight to the death. It's just a friendly spar. You're all welcome to watch if you're curious. Benimaru's eyes lit up. Can we really watch, Rimuru-sama? Of course. Spread the word to the other executives. Velzard will set up a barrier to contain the fight while you all watch safely from outside, I said, cracking my knuckles and barely containing my excitement. I couldn't help but smirk at the curious, slightly worried looks from Luminous and her companions. This is going to be fun. After a quick nod, Benimaru excused himself to inform the others, and once everyone was ready, I teleported us to an open field just outside the city. The breeze was crisp, the sky clear as I stretched my arms, sending Veldora a mental ping through thought communication. Soon, my executives gathered around us. Benimaru, Diablo, Gabaru, Gobta, Geld, Haku, Ranga, Cheyenne, Shuna, Sui, and Zijin had arrived, ready to witness the grand spectacle. Luminous, Lewis, and Hinata also took their seats to witness the upcoming clash. Eventually, a dark shadow suddenly spread across the field as my opponent arrived. High above us, Veldora's unmistakable form soared through the sky, his massive wings casting an ominous, powerful silhouette. The ground trembled as he descended in a spiraling dive, landing with a thunderous crash that left a crater behind and sent debris flying. Such a dramatic entrance. Well, it was natural for him. Kuhaha! Behold, the mighty storm dragon. Any who face me shall perish. Veldora's voice echoed like a thunderclap, the sheer volume shaking the air. Velzard casually shielded us from the blast of debris with a flick of her hand, smirking at Veldora's theatrics as the dust settled. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us until I was only a few meters from his towering dragon form. He was magnificent, the scales along his massive body gleaming, his eyes bright with excitement. "Glad you could make it, Veldora," I called out, letting a bit of mock bravado slip into my tone. "I thought you'd be too scared to show up." His maw curved into a grin, sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight. "Huh. The mighty storm dragon fears no one in a spar, unless we're talking about my elder sister." His voice trailed off as he quickly glanced at Velzard, who smirked approvingly before refocusing on me. "You may be my sworn brother, Rimuru, but don't think for a second I'll go easy on you." With his last words echoing across the field, a tense silence fell. Everyone around us was transfixed, eyes wide as they prepared to witness a spectacle few would ever see. With excitement sparking through my veins, I called out, "Yeah, give it your best shot, Veldora. Velz-chan, we're ready." Velzard gave a simple nod, her expression composed but curious. Snapping her fingers, a towering barrier formed around us, stretching across a kilometer and shimmering with a crystalline frost. Snow crystal was nigh impenetrable, a glistening fortress that locked Veldora and me in, isolating our clash from the rest of the world. Veldora transformed into his human form, his eyes burning with excitement, and we squared off. "I hope you're ready for some tough training, Rimuru," he boomed, settling into a low, powerful stance. My grin widened as I matched his energy, taking my own stance. "You're the one who should be worried, sworn brother. I'm not holding back anymore." The air was thick with tension as we stood, our eyes locked, anticipation crackling between us. This time, I would rely on my own strength without Seal's assistance. I wanted to test my limits. Just as I readied myself, Veldora vanished in a burst of speed. Even with my heightened processing speed, I could barely track him as he reappeared before me, his fists surging with dense, dark magicules, tendrils of black lightning twisting around it. "Quahaha! Don't zone out in battle, Rimuru. Eat this, black flash," he bellowed. His fist came hurtling toward my gut, radiating an intense, destructive aura. I barely managed to brace, deploying multidimensional barrier just in time. Even so, the force of his punch tore through, sending shockwaves through my body. The black sparks crackled on impact as I was blasted backward, skidding across the ground before regaining my balance. It was a staggering blow. TCH. Using moves from Jujutsu Kaisen, huh? What a weeb, I muttered, grinning to myself. Fine, if that's how he wanted to play, I'd meet him head on. Without missing a beat, Veldora lunged at me again, a fierce kick aimed at my head. I ducked low, channeling storm magic through my fist, and countered with my own black flash. My punch connected with his stomach, sending him skyward, though I knew his own magic couldn't truly harm him. Landing, Veldora's expression lit up with a mixture of surprise and glee as he steadied himself. "I see you're well versed in the sacred texts, Rimuru." I smirked, getting into a stance. "You think you're the master? You merely adopted the sacred texts. I was born in it, molded by it. You could never compare your knowledge of manga to mine. Let's see if you can keep up, Veldora." With laughter echoing across the field, Veldora charged, and I met him in a flash. The force of our departure sent tremors through the ground, shockwaves rippling outwards that would have torn through any ordinary defenses. As he manifested a god-grade sword from pure magicules, I drew my blade, Fangs of the Devourer, which recently evolved into a weapon of equal might. Clang! Our blades met with explosive force, unleashing a resounding shockwave that shook the barrier enclosing us. We launched into a rapid exchange of strikes, blades flashing with terrifying speed and precision. Veldora's sheer physical strength outmatched mine, and his magicule reserves were near boundless in comparison, making every strike feel like a tidal wave. But I held my own, moving with refined technique and precision honed through relentless training with Hikuru and Velzard's lessons on energy efficiency. It was the only way I could match his raw power. Realizing the close combat was going nowhere, Veldora leaped back, his hands crackling with dark electricity and roaring flames. "Black lightning! Black flame!" he shouted, sending a flurry of devastating attacks my way. In an instant, I activated Cease Motion, freezing the very energy of his attacks in their path. Pure energy was no match for this skill, dissipating as they came into range. I could feel his frustration rising. Quahaha. Impressive. But let's see you handle this, he bellowed loudly, his hands forming a strange symbol. A sinking feeling hit me. No fucking way. Domain expansion, world of raging storms. Veldora's voice thundered as his eyes ignited with a blazing blue light. Bolts of lightning arced from his body as the area around us transformed. Dark clouds gathered within the barrier, swirling violently as massive lightning bolts struck the ground. Winds whipped with terrifying fury, howling as they tore through the landscape, battering me back as I struggled to maintain my footing. This was Storm of Destruction, a storm so potent that civilizations could be erased in its wake, crackling around me. Lightning erupted around us, the winds biting and fierce. Holding up my blade, I met Veldora's gaze, my power surging to meet his. Is that all, Veldora? I thought you were going to push me past my limits. I yelled through the cacophony, readying myself. Then come at me with all you've got, Rimuru, he roared back. Quick on my feet, I ducked and dodged the onslaught of thunderbolts from Veldora's conjured storm. Each one blazed with enough energy to incinerate lesser beings down to the soul. But his probability manipulation narrowed the gap between us, pulling each strike closer to me with terrifying accuracy. Crack! A thunderbolt finally connected, jolting through my body and igniting my soul with searing electricity. TCH. Seal, how much damage did that do to my soul? Around 5%, Rimuru-sama. The number was chilling. These bolts weren't just flashy attacks. No, they were deadly enough to tear apart my soul, and even I wouldn't survive more than 20 of them. Veldora's sheer pool of magicules meant this storm could rage on for far longer than I could withstand it. I'd be fighting a losing battle if I didn't end it soon. Adjusting cease motion, I tightened its range to maximize its effect on incoming threats. Hopefully, this would slow any close calls enough to dodge in time. I took a deep breath and charged forward, launching a volley of frost beam in Veldora's direction. Each beam emitted an icy paradox. Its energy was so concentrated that it reached absolute zero, siphoning ambient energy as it cut through the air. Most of the beams narrowly missed as he dodged with his inhuman speed until one finally hit home, tearing his right arm clean off and gouging a chunk out of his side. But no sooner had the beam finished its work than his body began to regenerate, sinew knitting back and muscle reforming as if nothing had happened. Impressive, Rimuru. You managed to damage me somewhat. Veldora's voice boomed, shaking the air with laughter. His enjoyment only intensified my focus. Ha! Quit talking mid-battle, old man. I lunged forward, barely closing the distance before he raised another barrier around himself, just as expected. This was my moment. Activating Shub Niguratha's skill nullification, I slipped past his barriers and hindered his probability manipulation, giving me a rare opening. With a swift punch aimed at his core, I unleashed Hail Flash. The hit connected, and in an instant, his body froze, coated in a thick frost. I knew it wouldn't hold him long since his nature as a true dragon would shrug it off in less than a second. But a fraction of a second was all I needed. It's time to end this, Veldora, I called out, snapping my fingers as icy chains materialized from the ether, wrapping tightly around his limbs, fusing to the frost with unbreakable strength. This was Verglas Binding, an upgraded version of unlimited imprisonment that I created to allow me to completely immobilize an opponent without the use of time stop. It's much more effective than its predecessor, and only the user can lift the seal in most cases. The trade-off is that the target must be immobilized beforehand, a difficult task when you're dealing with a true dragon. Veldora's momentary stillness allowed the chains to secure, and I had the upper hand for once. Oi, Rimuru, this move is a foul. Are you trying to seal me away like what Kinjaka did to Gojo? He shouted, fury and disbelief coloring his words. Not at all, Veldora. You'll be free in about 1 minute. Just enough time for me to finish what I started, I said, grinning widely. Leaving him bound, I created distance, preparing the attack seal and I had analyzed over weeks since acquiring God of the Void, Azathoth. Its crowning jewel, imaginary collapse, was perhaps the most frightening ability in existence. Just the thought of it unnerved me. With Seal's help, I could control it. However, with her absence from this fight, my grip on it was tenuous at best. This skill was more than a simple move. It allowed the user to generate and harness energy beyond reckoning, an energy seal referred to as the essence of nothingness, or turn null. It was like wielding antimatter, a substance so destructive that even the slightest trace could obliterate a planet in an instant. For this, I'd need utmost precision to avoid accidentally unleashing a world-ending calamity. With a roar of laughter echoing around us, Veldora's voice boomed, filled with triumph and challenge. Quahaha! Time's almost up, Rimuru. You have 10 seconds left before I give you the beatdown of a lifetime, he bellowed, his excitement brimming. I couldn't help but laugh along with him, letting the thrill of our battle wash over me. Ha 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 ha! I'll be the one laughing in the end, OLD man, I yelled defiantly, matching his volume. With my voice rising above the wind, I raised my right hand, holding my thumb over my middle and index fingers. Veldora's grin faltered as he saw the gesture, a look of horror creeping into his eyes. Wait. Rimuru, what are you doing? He bellowed, his usual bravado replaced with real panic. 9 ropes, polarized light, Crow and Shomio. The gap between within and without. By the name of Rimuru Tempest, destroy it all, Azathoth. I chanted because sometimes drama really is necessary. The tip of my fingers glowed with a dark purple light, throbbing with pure destructive energy. Imaginary technique, hollow collapse, I declared. I flicked my fingers, unleashing Turn Null's raw, annihilating force. Darkness swallowed my vision as the destructive energy surged forth, vaporizing everything in its path. The barrier shook under the strain as the ground below disintegrated, rock and air consumed by the endless void. Pain radiated through my body and soul, the sheer magnitude of the energy pushing them to their limits. 6% damage sustained by the body and soul of Rimuru-sama. Seal's voice was my only anchor as the waves of power continued tearing through me. 7%, 9%, 13%, 20%. Finally, the energy of Turn Null dissipated. I hovered above the barren ground, surveying the destruction. A massive crater, nearly 100 meters deep, sprawled inside the barrier. Even the barrier itself bore fractures, as if struggling to contain the devastation I'd unleashed. I looked around for Veldora, but his physical form had been obliterated. Only his ego remained, lodged in my soul. Summoning a clone, I activated True Dragon Release, Storm, and in an instant, Veldora reappeared, whole and grinning. Quahaha! You actually managed to defeat me. I'm proud of you, Rimuru. As expected of my sworn brother. His words, filled with admiration, caught me off guard. Then he extended his fist. His honest praise moved me, and I returned his fist bump with a grin. Maybe Veldora really had grown. But reality hit me as I took in the destruction. What have I done? I went too far, I yelled, staring at the smoking crater in dismay. Veldora only laughed, clapping me hard on the back. Quahaha! No need to worry, Rimuru. Watch this, fertile paradox. He held his hand out to the crater. Immediately, the earth began to reform, filling the vast hole while grass and greenery sprouted over it. In moments, the land looked untouched, as if our battle had left no scar. As we drifted to the ground, Velzard dispelled the barrier, reappearing nearby with the others following close behind. She walked over with a calm, knowing smile that made even Veldora seem a little nervous. Fufufu spectacular battle, you two. I'm proud of your growth, Veldora-kun, she said, her tone soft but filled with genuine pride. Keep it up, and before long, you might even surpass Velgrind-chan, maybe even me. She turned to Veldora, who blushed, scratching his head at his sister's praise. Velzard's eyes softened as she looked back at me, her smile warm. Rimuru-kun, you surprised me once again. I don't even have words anymore. You truly are incredible. Before I could react, She leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. Yhhh. What the hell? In front of your brother too. I covered my face in embarrassment as Velzard laughed, her amusement ringing out. When I finally lowered my hands, I caught Veldora pointedly looking away, his face nearly as red as mine. Sigh. I somehow felt both empathy and exasperation with him. With a sweetly terrifying smile, Velzard turned to her brother. You saw nothing, right, Veldora Cohen? She asked, her tone immediately switching to her cold, terrifying self. He nodded furiously, eyes wide. Why yes, I saw nothing. Velzard NE, he affirmed loudly, and Velzard nodded in satisfaction. The ground rumbled as the rest of our group arrived. My subordinates looked overjoyed and cheered while luminous companions gazed at the scene in disbelief. Rimuru-sama, Chapter 11, Unexpected Visitors. Flashback to the start of the fight. Velzard's POV. We stood in anticipation, waiting for the clash between Rimuru and Veldora to begin. I'd erected an enormous barrier around them to contain the devastation of their impending battle. I don't know why, but I have this nagging feeling that Rimuru has something dangerous up his sleeve that could push this barrier to its limit. I knew he'd put up a good fight against my little brother, but for him to confidently give himself a higher than a 50% chance of winning was surprising. This will be the first time we see Rimuru-sama fighting seriously, Cheyenne announced, practically vibrating with excitement. His other subordinates nodded in agreement, equally eager. And his opponent is none other than Veldora-sama, Benimaru affirmed calmly. Their battle will truly be a spectacle. I glanced over to my left, where Luminous and her subordinates were watching with anticipation. I could sense their apprehension, and it made sense. A clash like this was rare, even for them. After their quick exchange and a long, tense standoff, the battle finally began. In a flash, Veldora closed the gap between them, his fist crackling with storm magic as he aimed a punch at Rimuru. Thanks to Rimuru's barrier, it didn't connect, but the force alone sent him flying back a fair distance. How will you respond, Rimuru? To be able to tank a direct hit from the storm dragon himself is ridiculous, Luminous murmured, her voice edged with awe and disbelief. Hinata, ever the realist, responded. Rimuru-sen must have one hell of a barrier to do that. Kafufu, as expected of Rimuru-sama, Diablo chimed in, a spark of pride in his eyes. Veldora didn't waste any time, charging at Rimuru again and attempting to land a kick. Rimuru dodged deftly, countering with a punch of his own, infused with storm magic. The hit connected, sending Veldora briefly airborne, though he was unharmed. You're just full of surprises, Rimuru. It appears Rimuru-sama can use the same magic as Veldora-sama, Sui observed. Ranga's tail thumped proudly. It is only natural for my master. Luminous' eyes widened after witnessing the display. The fact that he managed to land a direct hit is crazy, she muttered, and I chuckled to myself after. Their battles barely started, and she's already shocked. The fight escalated as they charged at each other at full speed, swords drawn. Their slashes were relentless and precise, each wielding a god-grade weapon, yet not a single hit landed. They were too skilled, too quick to dodge and parry. Slightly frustrated, Veldora finally created some distance between them and began spamming black lightning and black flame. Lewis shuddered as he watched the lightning spark. Seeing those lightning and flames brings back terrible memories, he murmured. Luminous gave a wry smile. Though I said not to dwell on it, I must agree. The power of a true dragon is terrifying. Rimuru activated cease motion, dispelling the energy of the projectiles. He's getting exceptionally skilled at using my abilities, and it won't be long before he'll master time stop as well. Will he pick up my little sister's scorch magic next? That would make 3 of our abilities he could wield. Quahaha. Impressive, but let's see you handle this. Veldora's thunderous voice filled the air as he brought his hands together in a hand sign. Domain expansion, world of raging storms, he bellowed. A dark storm surged within the barrier as lightning rained down, striking the ground in fierce, rapid succession. Rimuru, pinned in a tight spot, was forced to weave through the bolts, narrowly avoiding the worst. Despite his efforts, One finally struck him directly. Luminous' face drained of color. What is that? She asked, her voice laced with concern. That storm is terrifying, Hinata said, her usual calm replaced by anxiety. If it did any damage to Rimuru-san, it must be even more powerful than it looks. If anyone could hurt Rimuru-sama, it's no surprise it would be Veldora-sama, Hakuru observed with a respectful nod. Indeed, only a true dragon or those on that level could do so, Zijin affirmed, his tone steady. In response to the attack, Rimuru increased the barrier's effect by decreasing its range, slowing the lightning strikes around him until he could dodge safely. As he charged toward Veldora, he retaliated with energy beams at absolute zero. Veldora evaded most, but one hit, blowing off his right side. Luminous gasped, her eyes wide with shock. In no way, he actually managed to damage the storm dragon. Hinata's voice held a touch of admiration. It may not be much, but it's still impressive. As expected of Rimuru-sama, Cheyenne puffed up with pride. Benimura chuckled. He might just pull off a win at this rate. I'm sure Rimuru-kun has more tricks up his sleeve. I chimed in, unable to contain the smile tugging at my lips as I watched them push each other to the edge. Veldora's arm regenerated swiftly, and he looked taken aback, a gleam of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected Rimuru to land a solid hit, but if this was the start, I couldn't wait to see where their battle would lead. Closing the gap between them instantly, Rimuru drove his fist, crackling with intense frost energy, deep into Veldora's gut. The shock from the blow halted Veldora in his tracks. It was precisely as Rimuru had planned. With a snap of his fingers, he triggered a new spell that instantly encased Veldora. A murmur of disbelief spread among those watching. Is that the same seal the hero used on the Storm Dragon 300 years ago? Luminous asked wide-eyed. Close, but not quite, I replied, allowing a hint of pride to slip into my voice. This is a perfected version of that seal. By adding the effects of frost magic into the unlimited imprisonment, Rimuru-kun has created a bind that almost no creature can break free from. The revelation had a chilling effect on the crowd, and they looked at me as if expecting more unimaginable feats to unfold. That's insane. Rimuru-sen managed to refine the very seal that once imprisoned Veldora-sama? Hinata whispered, her voice a mix of terror and awe. It's only fitting for Rimuru-sama, given his ability to modify and elevate skills as he pleased, Diablo said smugly, his eyes gleaming with admiration. Is such a thing even possible? Lewis asked, his disbelief evident in his voice. He may have a skill that can modify or upgrade other skills. But that's just ridiculous. Luminous responded, her voice still shaken. I wouldn't be too surprised. Rimuru-san is just an absolute monster, Hinata remarked honestly. Meanwhile, Veldora called it an absolute foul, but Rimuru told him it'd just be for a minute. Fufufu, it's time to see what Rimuru's been up to recently. But what came next was something I hadn't anticipated in the slightest. As Rimuru stepped back, preparing his next move, I saw him concentrate with such focus that dark purple sparks cracked at his fingertips. My heart skipped a beat as a deep, existential dread swept through me. Impossible. No one should be able to wield that power except for Veldora himself. Imaginary collapse. It was a skill that generated a form of energy so pure and dangerous that it embodied the essence of absolute nothingness. Turn null, as the energy was called, could erase anything it touched. Veldora had cast it to the edge of creation because its destructive nature was too volatile to contain. And now, Rimuru was about to unleash it. That light. Hinata's voice trembled, unable to look away from the pulsing violet glow. It feels wrong. What is that light? It looks so ominous, Luminous asked, her voice more tense than before. Something even I fear, I murmured. My words met with expressions of sheer terror. Almost everyone turned to me, their faces as pale as ash. Are you serious, Velzard-sama? Hinata questioned. I nodded grimly, more serious than you could imagine. If I may, Velzard-sama, Benimura interjected, his voice tense with unease. What exactly are we about to witness? You'll understand soon enough. I forced myself to sound calm, but even I was bracing for the worst. Within his binding, Veldora tried to free himself in desperation, sensing the overwhelming power gathering before him, but his efforts were futile. Rimuru raised his hand, the violet light coalescing to a blinding intensity, and uttered an incantation that reverberated with ominous power. Then, with a flick of his fingers, he unleashed it. The entire space inside the barrier erupted into blinding, chaotic destruction. A column of dark purple light surged upward, swallowing everything within. Its reach was vast, stretching from the ground to the heavens, blotting out the view of the inside. Even the barrier I had erected began to fracture. I poured more magicules into it, hoping it could hold. Such terrifying power. Hinata's voice quivered as she watched the impossible unfold. What the hell is that? Luminous nearly shrieked, her eyes darting to me, desperate for answers. What you're witnessing is the ultimate form of annihilation, I explained, watching the deadly glow with a mixture of horror and awe. It's called imaginary collapse, and until now, I thought only Veldora and I could control it. But somehow, Rimuru has harnessed it, though he will bear a price. Everyone went silent, struggling to process what they were seeing. What? They gasped in unison. So, Rimuru's wielding power reserved for the creator himself, Luminous whispered, visibly shaken. Even Hinata seemed lost for words, eyes transfixed on the pillar of destruction before us. He's truly monstrous. This is exactly what I'd expect from Rimuru-sama, Diablo said proudly, as though everything he had seen thus far had been a natural progression of events. The cataclysmic light finally began to fade, and as the dust settled, the barrier trembled but held on, barely. Inside, the entire battlefield was reduced to a monstrous crater, with deep fractures slicing through the earth where the ground once stood. Hovering above the ruin, Rimuru appeared bruised and battered, bearing visible damage from his own attack. But Veldora was nowhere to be seen. The force had annihilated his physical form down to the last atom. Is this truly the power you've achieved, Rimuru? You're just full of surprises. In no way. He actually defeated that lizard. Luminous' voice shook with disbelief. To think I once dared to challenge him, Hinata muttered, a shiver of terror running through her. Lewis looked to Luminous with a sense of vindication. Allying with Tempest was, without a doubt, a wise decision, Luminous-sama. She nodded, still too stunned to fully process it. Benimaru's eyes glinted with curiosity. So, does this mean Rimuru-sama is now on par with the true dragons? I shook my head, allowing a smirk to slip through. Not quite. Without imaginary collapse, he'd still struggle against a true dragon. But his potential is unmistakable. Will Veldora-sama recover from this? Shuna spoke up, her voice laced with concern. There's no need to worry, dear. Rimuru-kun can perfectly restore Veldora-kun with his skill. Right on cue, Rimuru conjured a clone and began his revival technique. Thanks to their shared soul corridor, the process was seamless, a demonstration of his mastery over the unimaginable. Incidentally, Rimuru and I now share a soul corridor as well. A few days ago, I asked him to establish one between us. Perhaps it was a bit petty, but seeing him share that connection with Veldora aroused a hint of jealousy. Now, the three of us were bonded at a level that made us all but invulnerable. Hinata's expression was a blend of awe and disbelief. Just like that, he restored the storm dragon entirely, as if nothing happened. I was hoping he'd be gone longer than a minute, Luminous muttered, folding her arms with a huff. Her frustration was evident, and I couldn't help but let out a soft giggle. Era, you seem to hold a grudge against my little brother, Luminous-san. Luminous hesitated, catching herself before sighing. Forgive me, Velzard-sama. I bear no ill will toward you or Rimuru, but memories of Veldora ravaging my city long ago remain fresh. It's hard to simply overlook that destruction. Lewis nodded, his expression somber, recalling the chaos he had unleashed in the past. I chuckled softly, waving a hand dismissively. I understand, truly, but you needn't worry. Rimuru-kun and I will keep him in line. My reassuring smile earned a slight grin from Luminous, and she gave a small, graceful bow. Thank you, Velzard-sama. Having allies like you both brings great peace of mind. To undo the damage caused by their battle, Veldora called forth his ability, Fertile Paradox, and a ripple of green energy pulsed outward, restoring the ruined landscape around us. The ground healed, regenerating in lush patches of grass and flowers that sprang up to cover the barren crater. Within moments, there was no sign that a destructive clash had taken place. The two of them touched down as if they had merely been on a friendly stroll. Their earlier intensity had dissipated entirely, and they looked rather nonchalant, though Veldora's smug grin was hard to miss. With the spar concluded, I dispelled the barrier around us and teleported to join them. I approached Veldora first, letting a proud smile break through. Fufufu, spectacular battle, you two. I'm proud of your growth, Veldora-kun, I said, giving him a light pat on the shoulder. His face flushed with bashful pride as he tried to shrug it off, though his usual bravado quickly returned. Keep it up, and before long, you might even surpass Velgrind-chan, maybe even me, I added. Rimuru's slightly exasperated sigh betrayed his amusement, and I turned to him, my expression softening. Rimuru-kun, you surprised me once again. I don't even have words anymore. You truly are incredible. Leaning forward, I pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek, letting the warmth linger. How bold of me. I hardly minded that Veldora was right there. If anything, his reaction was almost as satisfying. Predictably, he immediately looked away, a hint of red staining his cheeks. Rimuru blinked in surprise, clearly caught off guard, and for a brief moment, he seemed to forget his usual composure. Thanks, Velz-chan, he stammered, rubbing the back of his neck with a flustered smile. I couldn't help but laugh, watching his rare moment of vulnerability. To think that beneath all that power, he could still be easily caught off guard. Flashback to just after the fight started. Ramuru's POV. Tempest was oddly quiet. Not a single one of Rimuru's executives was in sight. I wonder what's going on, I muttered to myself, shrugging off the silence with excitement. If no one's around, that means we can set up our little spot without any fuss. Trainee got to work right away, building a tiny, cozy hut, while Beretta crossed their arms, their expression unamused. But just as I was admiring our new setup, a series of loud explosions echoed from a distance, followed by flashes of lightning. Eep, I squeaked, clutching my chest to calm down. The sudden booms made me jump. Luckily, the noises seemed far off, so we carried on as usual, deciding whatever was happening could wait until after our official business here was settled. A few minutes later, our hut was complete, nestled just right between two bushes. I proudly surveyed our tiny domain, hands on my hips. Behold, I am no longer a homeless demon lord. My very own, tiny palace, I announced, laughing victoriously. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that was enough. Yet the sounds of explosions kept going, getting louder and somehow even fiercer. My curiosity was starting to gnaw at me, and I looked toward the source of the commotion. Hey guys, let's check out what's going on over there, I said, pointing toward a distant, shimmering barrier crackling with power. I'll go wherever you go, Ramirez-sama. Trainee chirped, ever loyal. Beretta sighed but nodded, clearly resigning themselves to whatever madness I might get us into. We zipped across the fields until we reached the barrier, where the sight before us left me absolutely speechless. Inside, Rimuru and Veldora were locked in combat, their figures outlined by flashes of lightning and bursts of energy. My eyes went wide at the scene. Why on earth were Master and Rimuru fighting? But then I took a closer look. They didn't seem to be going all out, and it looked like more of a sparring match. Rimuru had that playful glint in his eyes, and Veldora was grinning as wildly as ever. Realizing this wasn't some deadly battle made it all the more thrilling. Incredible. We get front row seats to this clash of titans. We crept closer, positioning ourselves just outside the barrier to watch. Rimuru held his ground remarkably well, meeting each of Veldora's strikes with impressive prowess. Their swords clashed and sparked, the force of each blow reverberating through the air. Not once did either seem to have the upper hand. With a frustrated roar, Veldora suddenly retreated, unleashing a series of lightning bolts and streams of flame at Rimuru. I tensed as the deadly attacks hurtled toward him, but Rimuru simply dispelled them with one of his skills. He really has gotten more powerful. Veldora, not to be outdone, conjured a violent storm within the barrier. Lightning flashed in all directions, some bolts grazing dangerously close to Rimuru. I winced, watching as he dodged most of them, but took a hit from one that made him stagger slightly. Ouch, that must have stung a bit. As expected of Veldora-sama, he managed to damage Rimuru-sama, Trainee exclaimed with a hint of pride. Neither of them has shown their full strength yet. Let us keep that in mind, Beretta replied coolly, always the pragmatist. I barely heard them, too engrossed in the fight. Just then, Rimuru shot forward, landing a punch infused with frost energy that momentarily left Veldora frozen in place. Amazing. Freezing a true dragon in place was no small feat. Rimuru snapped his fingers, and shimmering chains appeared out of nowhere, wrapping around Veldora like living vines. I gasped, my mind racing. Wait a second, how is Rimuru using true dragon magic? And not just any true dragon's ability. It was Velzard's frost magic. Watching him use such extraordinary power, I couldn't help but feel a shiver of awe. I'd seen him in battle before, like against Clayman, but seeing him like this was different. Rimuru might be a unique existence in this world, an anomaly with limitless growth. Even among demon lords, he stood apart as an absurdly powerful enigma. He managed to bind Veldora-sama, Trainee said, both shocked and impressed. Naturally, Rimuru-sama is nothing if not resourceful, Beretta added, sounding almost proud. But while they chatted, I stared at something that made my blood run cold. A dark purple light was forming at Rimuru's fingertips, its energy rippling with a menacing power I hadn't seen in eons. My stomach dropped. Oi, is that what I think it is? My heart raced as memories flooded back. That energy had to be turned null, the energy Veldonava used to create the multiverse. I thought he'd locked it away at the edges of existence where no one could reach it. How in the world was Rimuru using it? Oh, Rimuru's really lost it this time. I blurted out, gripping Trainee's shoulder for reassurance. What is that, Ramiris-sama? Trainee asked, looking anxiously at the gathering light. I can't be sure, Beretta answered cautiously, but it appears to be something with immense destructive potential. I nodded, my eyes still locked on the ominous light. You have no idea? Rimuru's finger flicked, and the barrier was immediately filled with a blinding, dark purple light stretching into the heavens. For the first time in ages, the light of imaginary collapse had returned to the world, bathing everything in a dark, otherworldly glow. The ground shook violently, and when the light finally dissipated, it revealed a massive crater, a scar on the earth from its terrifying power. Veldora was nowhere to be seen, his form completely obliterated. Veldora-sama, Trainee cried, horrified at the sight. Beretta's expression remained calm, though they acknowledged it with a slow nod. It seems Rimuru-sama emerged victorious. Veldora will be fine. He's a true dragon, after all. Nothing could truly destroy him, and besides, I'm sure Rimuru has a plan up his sleeve. I gave Trainee a reassuring pat, trying to calm her. Almost on cue, Rimuru created a clone and, to my relief, restored Veldora. He even gave him back his original form, the storm dragon we all knew. Veldora immediately got to work, healing the devastated ground with a skill that returned the land to its former beauty. Once they'd landed, they shared a quick word, and the barrier vanished just as a woman with long white hair teleported next to them. Hey, who's that? I glanced at Trainee and Beretta, each of us exchanging puzzled looks. I still wanted to ask Rimuru if we could stay in Tempest, but with the arrival of this mystery woman, I had even more questions. Gathering my courage, I motioned for the others to follow, and together, we dashed toward Rimuru. His executives reached him first, but we were just a little behind, eager to make our grand entrance. Rimuru's POV. Rimuru-sama, my executives shouted in unison, their voices nearly loud enough to shake the ground. Boy, calm down. I can hear you just fine. I yelled back, raising my hand to wave off their unnecessary enthusiasm. Kafufu. What an incredible performance, Rimuru-sama. Diablo praised, a familiar glint of adoration in his eyes. We are truly honored to witness such a grand spectacle. His words, as always, were dripping with reverence. Thank you, Diablo, I replied, trying to keep a straight face as he looked at me like I'd split the heavens. As expected of Veldora-sama, Benimaru added with a nod. He's one of the few who could push you this far, Rimuru-sama. Beside him, Hakuru crossed his arms, nodding approvingly. Your swordsmanship has greatly improved, Rimuru-sama. I grinned, genuinely pleased. Thanks, Hakuru. Your training's been more effective than I ever expected. Hinata strolled up, raising an eyebrow with an amused smile. You really are absurd, you know that? I chuckled in response. I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you very much. She just sighed and shook her head. Only you would. Then Luminous stepped up, folding her arms with a smirk. Fufufu. I must thank you, Rimuru, for utterly beating that lizard. Veldora yelped, looking affronted. What did I do? Luminous' eyes narrowed, and a dangerous tick mark appeared on her forehead. What did you do? Did you forget about my city, the one you destroyed? She growled, her voice rising in anger. Oh, rest in peace, Veldora. I'll be sure to send flowers. Luminous, I've reflected, you know. Veldora stammered, scratching the back of his head. Really, I deeply regret it. I was just blowing off some steam. And hey, no one got hurt, right? Quahaha. I couldn't help but slap my forehead. This guy cannot read the room at all. Fucking dumbass. You insufferable idiot. Luminous seethed, and she was behind him in a flash. Her arms wrapped around his waist in what looked like an affectionate hug if you ignored how she was draining his magicules by the second. Rimuru. Velzard nay? Help! Veldora yelled in agony, writhing as his energy was siphoned. Velzard and I only exchanged a giggle. This seems like a fitting punishment for you, Veldora Cohen. I'd say it's far kinder than my education would be, Velzard replied calmly with a terrifyingly serene smile. Besides, you should earn her forgiveness after that abysmal apology. I nodded in agreement. A familiar voice suddenly called out as Veldora continued to plead for mercy. Yuhu, Rimuru, long time no see. I turned around to see none other than Ramiris, accompanied by Trainee and Beretta. Oi, what are you doing here? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Can't a fellow demon lord pay a friendly visit? She replied, crossing her arms with a huff. Besides, I couldn't find you guys anywhere, so I thought, what the heck? Her eyes widened as she finally noticed Velzard and Luminous, who were still happily draining the last of Veldora's magicules as he attempted to squirm free. Velzard. And Luminous, too. Ramiris stammered, practically vibrating with shock. And what's she doing to Master? Velzard smiled at her warmly. Good to see you too, Ramiris. And yes, it makes sense I'd be here. After all, I live in Tempest now. Ramiris's jaw dropped to the floor. You live here? Since when? Since after Walpurgis, Velzard replied, laughing. It's been quite a while, actually. Wait. I want to live here too, Ramiris suddenly exclaimed, practically bouncing with excitement. I blinked, trying to process what she just said. You want to live here? She nodded vigorously, looking a bit sheepish. Well, I want to move the entrance of my labyrinth here in Tempest. I asked you about it before Walpurgis, and you said you'd think about it. I suddenly remembered my promise. Trainee clasped her hands together, a hopeful gleam in her eyes. Please, Rimuru-sama. Ramiris-sama needs a place to stay. We'd be eternally grateful for your kindness. I tilted my head, thinking of potential uses for the labyrinth. Is it like the dwelling of the elementals? It could be beneficial, but does it have any special uses? Ramiris perked up at my question, her wings flapping with renewed enthusiasm. Oh, it's way better than that. With my intrinsic skill small world, I can create an isolated space of any size or shape I want. And get this, anything I think of becomes real inside it. My eyes widened in response. Anything. Anything, she confirmed proudly, her eyes sparkling. If I have a visual reference, I can create it. Now, that sounds like something we could use. My mind raced with possibilities, and suddenly, an idea hit me. A dungeon, I announced. Ramiris tilted her head. Dungeon? Yeah, I'd like a dungeon with multiple floors. I'm thinking of something challenging, a place for adventurers to train, earn rewards, or maybe even get rare items. I explained, barely able to contain my excitement. Hinata's eyes lit up with recognition, like in those video games. Exactly, I replied, grinning. It would be the perfect attraction and training ground. So, Ramiris, can you make it? She beamed proudly. I need the specifics, but yeah, I can make it work. Perfect, I exclaimed with a grin. Welcome to Tempest, Ramiris. Her face lit up, and she leaped at my hand with glee. Yay, I'm no longer homeless or jobless. I'm totally bragging about this to Dino. Hinata raised an eyebrow at me. Do you always accept new people that easily, Rimuru-san? I shrugged. If they're willing to contribute and follow our laws, why not? That makes sense, she nodded thoughtfully. Fufufu, it's nice to have you here, Ramiris. Velzard greeted her with a warm smile. Ramiris's cheeks practically glowed. This is amazing. Thank you, Rimuru, Velzard-sama. I finally have a place to call home. Thud. A loud noise resounded behind us. Turning around, I saw Veldora sprawled out on the grass, flat on his back, looking utterly defeated. His punishment had evidently come to a close, and Luminous was strolling back with a satisfied smile, dusting off her hands as if she'd just wrapped up a particularly satisfying chore. She didn't go easy on him, huh? Well, he brought it on himself. Ha, you really took it easy on him, huh, Luminous? I teased, unable to resist a grin. Oomph, that overgrown lizard got exactly what he deserved. She smirked, crossing her arms triumphantly. So, does that mean you've forgiven him now? Fufufu, I'll think about it. She chuckled as her eyes glinted with a mischievous edge. Women are terrifying sometimes. Luminous eyes swept over the group, pausing as she noticed Ramiris hovering nearby. Oh, Ramiris, what an unexpected sight. Hey, Luminous. Ramiris waved energetically. I just dropped by to talk with Rimuru, but then, I saw this spar going on. She gestured vaguely at Veldora's limp form. Is he, going to be all right? Luminous gave a playful chuckle. Oh, he'll be just fine. This was simply a little retribution. Nothing he didn't have coming. Ramiris shrank back, nodding quickly. I see. Feeling the tension finally settle, I clapped my hands together, breaking the mood. All right then, everyone. Let's head back to the city and give our guests the grand tour. I'm sure there's a lot they'll want to see. Chapter 12, The Future Labyrinth. Rimuru's POV. After my spar with Veldora concluded in my victory, we returned to the city. My executives slipped off to handle their duties while Velzard and I led our guests on a tour. As for Veldora, well, he was still lying on the ground, likely exhausted from Luminous punishment. Rest in peace, sworn brother. May you recover by tomorrow. Even though this wasn't their first visit, we invited Ramiris, Trainee, and Beretta along. Tempest has changed a lot since they last saw it. There were new restaurants, dessert places, and spots I had yet to try myself. Hinata joined us, too, eager to tag along again. We spent the afternoon wandering through the bustling streets, showing them Tempest's newest facilities and shops, which seemed to impress even the more frequent visitors. On a side note, Velzard wrapped her arm around mine throughout the tour and rarely let go. What? Think I'm bragging? That's because I am. Though, honestly, I could feel my face warm up at times, but I managed to keep a straight face. Luminous watched us with an odd, curious expression, though she said nothing. As dusk fell, the city transformed, and Tempest's nightlife came alive. The streets lit up, the crowd buzzed with energy, and the sights even mesmerized those who'd seen it all before. Taking advantage of the moment, Velzard and I led everyone to one of our favorite restaurants. The inviting aroma of the cuisine hit us as soon as we stepped inside, drawing a pleased sigh from Luminous, whose usual composure slipped a little as she eyed the menu. A Goblino waitress noticed us and quickly approached, smiling cheerfully. Good evening, Rimuru-sama. Velzard-sama, and everyone, she greeted us warmly. Good evening. Could we get a table for 8, please? I requested. Right this way, Your Majesty. She gave a respectful bow and led us to a large table, where we each took a seat. Once seated, we started listing off our orders. Ramiris and I tried to talk Beretta into joining us, but she politely declined. With our orders taken, the waitress left, and silence settled briefly over the table until Luminous broke it. I must say, I'm thoroughly impressed by what we saw today, Rimuru, she said with a genuine look of satisfaction, and Lewis nodded in agreement. Yes, this nation is only 2 years old, yet has advanced so much. I have no doubt it will continue to thrive, he praised. I'm glad I got to join in and experience it all again, Hinata confessed sheepishly, admitting she was more excited than she'd let on. Ha, you're always welcome, Hinata. There's plenty more food here to try anytime, I replied with a grin, and she gave a slight nod in thanks. Then, out of nowhere, Ramiris spoke up. But Rimuru, aren't you worried about the angels coming for Tempest? Her tone was a mix of curiosity and concern, which slightly threw me off. Angels, I repeated, tilting my head. Oh yes, I almost forgot about those annoying bugs, Luminous muttered, pressing a hand to her forehead, as if the very thought irritated her. Seeing my curious look, she explained further. Every half-millennium or so, millions of angels rain down from the heavens to lay waste to overly developed nations. Is that why this world's technology hasn't advanced very far? I asked, genuinely surprised, and Luminous nodded. Exactly. You shouldn't worry too much, though. Your nation is likely well prepared to fend off these pests. While a select few angels are powerful, their real threat lies in their numbers, she added. Hinata chimed in with a reassuring nod. Tempest is home to 2 true dragons, a semi-true dragon-level individual, and several high-class mages. I doubt the angels would last long here, she remarked, her tone casual yet confident. Seeing I still looked a bit concerned, Velzard placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, her gaze warm. They're right, Rimuru-kun. Only a handful of angels pose any real threat. I understand your habit of staying cautious and not growing complacent, but I think you should also take pride in your strengths, she said, her voice gentle yet assertive. Why, yeah, you're right, I replied, flustered as her soft smile made me glance away. She's always good at calming my nerves. Yeah, Rimuru. Ramiris chimed in enthusiastically. You even managed to defeat Master. Those angels are nothing next to you. Even without imaginary collapse, you could easily handle them with your skill arsenal, Velzard added, giving me a knowing look. I raised an eyebrow. That reminds me, how does she know about that skill? Seal, did you tell Velzard about imaginary collapse? Not at all. Velzard likely learned of it from her elder brother, who was the original wielder of imaginary collapse. I guess that makes sense. So, technically, it's not my secret. I should have talked to her about it earlier. Speaking of Velzard and secrets, does she know about my recent skills, or about you? She's only aware of the 4 ultimate skills you disclosed to her previously, which can be considered outdated now. And she didn't sense you when we set up the soul corridor? I kept my presence in your soul to a minimum. She only sensed a faint ego, which she likely dismissed as the remnants of Raphael. That's good. Not that I don't trust Velzard, I do. I even told her my ultimate skills before. However, with these recent developments, it's better to keep a few things under wraps, at least for now. Eventually, though, I might fill her in, especially since I've been using so much of her magic lately. Besides, I'll need her help if I ever hope to evolve into a true dragon. That thing is truly terrifying, Rimuru, Luminous commented, eyeing me seriously. It destroyed Veldora's material body in a single hit and even managed to crack Velzard-sama's barrier. Everyone at the table murmured in agreement, looking impressed. True, but it isn't something I can use lightly, I said, making sure they understood. You all saw the effect it had on me. I took quite a bit of damage from releasing just a sliver of that energy. I've been training to control it better and sustain less damage, but for now, it's a last resort move. They all looked intrigued, exchanging glances, and Velzard's expression softened. It's only natural that such a force is difficult to handle. Even Veldonava struggled to wield it. Ramiris chimed in, waving her hand around. Yeah, once Veldonava-sama was done creating everything, he chucked the leftovers of that energy to the edges of the universe. Nowhere else to stash it. I raised an eyebrow at Velzard. Wait, did you have to share that with everyone? She gave a sly smile. Fufufu, it's not really your secret, Rimuru. I've known about Turn Null since my elder brother told me ages ago. Besides, I kept all your other skills under wraps, didn't I? She even blew me a playful air kiss. I sighed, shrugging. Fair point. Not like anyone could actually do anything about it, even if word got out. I muttered, my voice as casual as can be. Luminous leaned in with a grin. Oh my, quite the confidence there, Rimuru. But you're not wrong. I doubt anyone could deal with an attack that powerful. The table conversation shifted naturally as the food arrived, and we all dug in. I had to hand it to this place. The food was flawless, as always. We savored each bite, making room for the desserts we'd ordered and indulged in the top-tier wine. I noticed Luminous and Velzard lowering their poison resistance just enough to get tipsy without losing their senses. I sulked at being unable to do the same, much to their amusement. After teasing me, Velzard finally taught me how to lower my own resistance. It took a few tries, but soon enough, I was a bit tipsy, too, which brought on even more laughs. The night wore on in lively conversation. Luminous was surprisingly cheeky, possibly due to the wine. She took every chance to tease Hinata, even making playful advances. Lewis and Beretta stayed on the quieter side, seemingly content to observe. At the same time, Ramiris and Trainee hit the drinks a little harder, with Ramiris needing to be carried around by Trainee. Eventually, the night grew late, and the tour ended. The guests were disappointed that we hadn't had time for the hot springs, but I assured them they could return any time for a proper soak. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Luminous returned to Lobelia with Hinata and Lewis. Velzard and I were about to head home ourselves when I heard Ramiris' voice. Wait, Rimuru, what about us? Ramiris called, looking expectant with Trainee and Beretta by her side. You three will be living here from now on, but it's a bit late to go over everything. I have an idea. I snapped my fingers, teleporting us all back to my house. Geez, a little warning next time, Rimuru, Ramiris complained, flailing a bit as we landed. I just shrugged. You'll stay in Veldora's room tonight since he doesn't actually use it, I replied casually, watching as Ramiris' eyes went wide. Master's room? She uttered in disbelief. I am not worthy to step foot in Veldora-sama's room, Trainee added, a little flustered. I couldn't help but chuckle at their nervousness. Relax. He practically lives in the library or the living room anyway. Right on cue, the library door creaked open, and Veldora shuffled out in his goofy pajamas, holding a manga in one hand and a mug of hot cocoa in the other. Quahaha. It's fine, you three. Rimuru's right. I hardly use my room. You're welcome to it for the night, he declared dramatically. Velzard smiled softly. Veldora-kun, it's late. Keep it down, please, she requested, her tone polite, yet underscored with a cold edge. Veldora's bluster faded as he nodded meekly. Why yes, Velzard nay, he mumbled, plopping onto the couch with his manga. Velzard and I headed upstairs, slipping into our sleeping clothes and settling into bed. I had to admit, I liked the simplicity of what we wore at night. Velzard's oversized white shirt with a slime print was long enough to nearly cover her shorts, and my pajamas were dotted with little slimes. We lay side by side, the moonlight casting a gentle glow around us. Exhausted from the day, I could feel myself drifting as I looked at her. The dim light brought out the depth in her blue eyes, and her white hair gracefully framed her face. Without thinking, I found myself running my fingers through Velzard's hair, savoring the silky texture as it slipped between my fingers. She looked at me, eyes widening slightly in surprise, before a soft smile crossed her lips. Do you like my hair, Rimuru-kun? She asked with a playful lilt. Who wouldn't? I murmured, still gently stroking her hair. It's incredibly soft, smooth, and smells nice. I smirked, catching a hint of pink rise to her cheeks. She bit her lip, clearly flustered, then shyly reached out, and began running her fingers through my hair in return. "Why, your hair is quite nice too, Rimuru-kun," she said softly, her gaze fixed on her hand as she absent-mindedly toyed with my strands. "It's really nice, Rimuru-kun," she murmured again, a little dazed. I chuckled. "You're adorable when you get all flustered, Velzard." Her cheeks flushed a deeper red, and she quickly turned her face away, crossing her arms with a cute little pout. "Don't just say that so casually, umph." Seeing my chance, I leaned in close and planted a soft kiss on her cheek. She gasped, her eyes widening before quickly burying her face in the pillow, practically radiating heat. Heh, mission accomplished. While she hid, I gently moved her hair aside and pressed a tender kiss on the nape of her neck, earning a light squirm from her. "How cute." "Good night, Velzard," I whispered. Good night, Rimuru-kun," she replied in a small, muffled voice, still embarrassed. Satisfied with my little victory, I rolled onto my back, giving her space to recover. A few minutes later, I could tell by her even breathing that she'd drifted off to sleep. It looks like my revenge teasing might have worn her out. Lying in the dim light, I thought about this strange, excellent bond between us. In some ways, it reminded me of those almost couples I'd seen in my past life. They were the kind who acted as close as lovers, but never said it outright. Maybe we were the same way, teetering somewhere between friendship and something more. Since she moved to Tempest a month ago, we've grown so close that I've opened up to her about things I'd never thought I'd share with anyone. And she's done the same, sharing pieces of herself she usually kept hidden. She's intimidating at times, sure, especially when her cold nature begins to show, but there's no denying how wonderful it feels to be around her. It might be safe to say I do have feelings for her in one way or another. Sooner or later, I know they'll deepen, and when that time comes, I want to be ready to tell her how I feel. But for now, I should stop overthinking and let myself drift off. Velzard's POV. I blinked awake, morning light spilling through the window as I stretched out, savoring the warmth left over from a beautiful night's sleep. Glancing beside me, I saw Rimuru still fast asleep, his face peaceful and calm. How cute. I couldn't help myself as my fingers lightly stroked his soft hair, mimicking how he'd done the same last night. Last night? Oh, last night. Wait. I felt heat flood my face, and my fingers froze mid-stroke. I remember now. Flustered, my hand instinctively touched the back of my neck where he'd kissed me. Did he really do that? I felt a wild blush spreading. UWA. Rimuru. Since when did he start fighting back? Those romance manga lied. The character getting teased never strikes back. At least not like that. Just remembering it made my heart race all over again. When we first met, teasing him had been pure fun, watching him stumble and blush. But then he'd started retaliating. And the second time, at the hot spring, my cheeks were heating up all over again just thinking about it. He'd completely caught me off guard back then, but I liked it. I'd even hoped he'd go further. If only Veldora hadn't crashed in at the worst possible moment. Stupid little brother. Honestly, if he'd actually tried to stop us, I would have given him a piece of my mind right then and there. With all these memories swirling around, a thought struck me that left me wide-eyed. Do I like Rimuru? Not just as a close friend, but romantically? I felt my cheeks grow even hotter. It's strange. For millennia, I'd never felt anything like this for anyone. I only knew about these kinds of feelings from the romance manga I'd started reading lately. Something about those stories fascinated me. Maybe deep down, I longed to feel that way, to experience the closeness those characters had. But Rimuru? Somehow, he had stirred those feelings in me. I glanced back at him, the way the morning light framed his serene expression. His ethereal beauty always took my breath away. Ignoring the blush on my face, I leaned in close and placed a gentle kiss on his forehead. This feeling was so unfamiliar. It thrilled me, but it also scared me. In the stories I'd read, the characters often struggled with the same thing. They were too afraid to reveal their true feelings, fearing rejection. Now here I was, terrified of the same thing. What if he didn't feel the same way? Yet, with how we acted around each other, it already felt like we were in some unspoken relationship. We just hadn't said it out loud. Did we even need to? But why did the idea of another woman growing close to him trigger this strange feeling inside me? I held his hand, squeezing it gently, almost as if my heart needed reassurance. I'd fallen for him, truly and deeply. At first, he'd just intrigued me, this fascinating person with a potential unlike any I'd ever seen. But over time, I grew to love being around him, our closeness building into something I never expected. I felt a warmth rising from within, an uncontainable desire and jealousy at the thought of anyone else holding that place in his heart. Confirmed. Acquiring the unique skill envy. Success. The voice of the world echoed in my mind. I hadn't heard it in so long. A rush of strength swept over me as the reality sank in. My emotions, the intensity of my feelings, and my need for closeness had granted me a new power. I could feel it, raw and potent, shaping my very soul. I didn't fully understand what it entailed, but its presence was powerful and undeniable. This skill was born of my deepest emotions, and I knew it would be pivotal in the journey ahead. It may even become the key to keeping Rimuru close. A stirring beside me pulled me from my thoughts as Rimuru finally blinked his eyes open, stretching and letting out a soft yawn. Yawn? Good morning, Velzard. He greeted sleepily, his gaze warm and inviting. Without another thought, I wrapped my arms around him, catching him by surprise. "Hey, Velzard," he murmured with a little chuckle. "What's gotten into you this morning?" I smiled, nestling into his warmth. "Fu, I just wanted a morning hug." He laughed softly and returned the embrace, holding me gently until we pulled back. "Would you like a hug like this every morning?" he teased, flashing a playful grin. "That would be nice, Rimuru. Good morning, by the way," I replied with a smirk of my own, savoring the closeness. "All right then," he said, still smiling. "We should get ready. We have that meeting with Rimuru about the labyrinth, right?" "Indeed," I confirmed with a nod, already feeling more confident and empowered than ever. Third-person POV. The discussion regarding Rimurus Labyrinth unfolded in the cozy living room of Rimuru's house. He had invited several key figures, including Geld and the dwarven artisans, whose expertise would be essential for his ambitious plans. It wasn't long before everyone had arrived, settling in for the meeting. The air buzzed with anticipation as each person knew this project could shift Tempest's future. Rimuru began by explaining his vision in careful detail. "The labyrinth entrance," he began, gesturing with enthusiasm. "It will be positioned right beside the stadium. I want it to be impossible to miss, a grand structure to catch the eye of adventurers and make them eager to enter. Not only will it look impressive, but it'll be even better on the inside. I can resurrect anyone who dies in the labyrinth, so they don't have to worry about real danger. It's perfect for your RPG idea, Rimuru." Rimuru chimed in excitedly. With that reassurance, Rimuru laid out the dungeon's specifications. It would contain 100 floors designed to challenge and enthrall adventurers. The structure would offer escalating difficulty levels, with the topmost floor being a beginner-friendly area and each successive level introducing more dangerous traps and increasingly powerful monsters. To add to the excitement, every 10 floors would present a formidable boss battle, forcing participants to test their skills and strategies. The rewards would match the challenges, as adventurers would find better loot the deeper they ventured. And at the bottom of it all, an ultimate test awaited. The final floor was guarded by none other than Veldora Tempest, the storm dragon himself. Veldora, grinning with anticipation, looked positively delighted by the prospect of being a dungeon boss. Rimuru then outlined the benefits of Veldora's participation. Firstly, Veldora could release his vast magicules safely within the dungeon, sparing Tempest's citizens from the overwhelming effects of his power. This steady release of magicules would also allow the spawning of high-level monsters on the floors just above his lair, giving adventurers a true challenge as they approached the end. As the magicule density thinned on the higher levels, the danger level of monsters would naturally decrease, offering a manageable learning curve. Veldora's presence would also benefit Rimuru, as his magicules could sustain the labyrinth's construction and continuous maintenance. It was a necessary feature for such an ambitious project. Finally, As Rimuru pointed out, Veldora would make an incredible final boss. There was no greater incentive than the chance to face down a legendary storm dragon for those bold or skilled enough to make it to the end. The plan is flawless, Rimuru, Ramiris said, practically bouncing with excitement. Veldora, who had been nodding enthusiastically the entire time, was beside himself with excitement, puffing up his chest in pride. Yes, yes, this is perfect. It's the ultimate role for me, the great Veldora. And to think, I'll finally get the recognition I deserve, he declared. Looks like Weeb Dragon number 1 approves, Rimuru quipped, noting Veldora's endless enthusiasm. He couldn't help but chuckle to himself. After all, Velzard had recently begun indulging in similar interests, though her fascination with Rimuru's world was much more subdued and almost dignified by comparison. Geld and the dwarves took this chance to report on another project. We've nearly completed the Colosseum, Geld announced, beaming with pride. It'll be finished just in time for the labyrinth's opening. We're ready for whatever big plans you have next, Rimuru-sama, Kaijin followed up. Rimuru nodded, a spark of excitement flashing in his eyes. There was indeed another plan in the works. It was a project so vast that it would involve all of Tempest. However, he kept his intentions under wraps, saving the reveal for when all of his top executives were present. With the labyrinth plan finalized and the Colosseum nearly completed, the group wrapped up their impromptu meeting, each person buzzing with newfound purpose. Rimuru led the way to the Capitol building, where more significant matters still awaited their attention. Rimuru's POV. Everything's going swimmingly, and I can barely contain my excitement about getting started on the labyrinth. The new Colosseum was also nearly complete, and both were set to debut around the same time. I can already see these two attractions becoming some of the biggest highlights of Tempest, drawing in adventurers and curious travelers from far and wide. Now, though, I'm in the meeting room with my executives, ready to discuss the next big step for our nation. Velzard stood calmly to my right, lending an air of silent strength, while the others were seated in their usual places around the table. Diablo and Cheyenne were behind me, alert and focused. I adjust my seat, clearing my throat to gather everyone's attention. It was time to bring up the matter I've been putting off for quite a while. I'm glad to see you're all here. Thank you for coming to this meeting. I began, my eyes scanning the room to gauge their reactions. Everyone nodded silently, giving me their full attention. Now, on to our topic of discussion. I continued, and that's my overdue audience with the tribes and nations residing within the Great Jura Forest. I've delayed this for a while, caught up with other priorities, and for that, I apologize. I gave a slight bow, my voice sincere. Immediately, my subordinates reacted. Don't worry about it, Rimuru-sama. There's no need to rush. Only fools would push us to act hastily in matters of diplomacy, Benimaru replied confidently. The others nodded in agreement, some with grins, clearly unfazed by the delay. Indeed, Rimuru-sama, they should be honored you're even considering meeting with these lesser beings, Diablo added with his usual eccentric manner, eyes glinting with mischief. I chuckled at their support. Thanks, everyone. But as for the audience itself, I've decided on something a bit more exciting. Oh, and what do you have planned, Rimuru-sama? Shuna inquired, curious and attentive. A mischievous smirk crept across my face as I looked around at my eager executives. I'll get to that soon enough. But first, I'd like you all to meet our newest members of Tempest, I said, gesturing toward Ramiris and her subordinates standing by the doorway. Ramiris stepped forward with an exaggerated flourish, her tiny frame full of confidence. Greetings, everyone. 'Tis I, Ramiris, the Labyrinth Fairy and one of the ancient demon lords. Nice to meet you all again, she announced, puffing out her non-existent chest with a proud smile. My executives exchange wide-eyed glances before they burst into polite applause. It's an honor to have you here, Ramiris-sama, Shuna replied, bowing respectfully and smiling warmly. Thanks. I'll be in your care from now on, everyone. Ramiris exclaimed enthusiastically and was met with warm smiles that made her feel at home. I cleared my throat, shifting back into my role as host. Now, as to why she's here in Tempest. Ramiris will help facilitate my plan to open an adventurer's dungeon here. We'll set the entrance right next to the Colosseum, and I believe these two projects will become major attractions for visitors. But as for the exact nature of this dungeon, I'll explain more about that in due time. I replied with a sly smirk. The room buzzed with curiosity and excitement. Everyone leaned in to hear more, and their anticipation was evident. And that brings me to the main reason I called this meeting. I continued, shifting the atmosphere slightly with a purposeful tone. You may wonder how the dungeon, the Colosseum, and our audience with the great Jura Forest tribes fit together. The truth is, I want to launch the grandest festival Tempest has ever seen. This event will celebrate everything our nation offers and provide an incredible spectacle for everyone to enjoy. I could see the astonishment on their faces as I laid out my vision. So you're saying? Shuna stammered, her excitement evident. Exactly, I confirmed, unable to contain my grin. Rather than going to each tribe and nation individually, I'll invite them to Tempest for a massive festival. In celebration of my ascension to a demon lord, I've decided to dub it the Founding Festival. The room erupts in cheers and gasps of amazement. A massive festival, you say? Rigard exclaimed, practically bouncing with excitement. I nod with a grin. That's right, and I'll also invite several acquaintances and friendly leaders from beyond the forest. This will be a monumental event, so I want Tempest to look its absolute best. I plan to hold it 2 weeks after the Colosseum and dungeon are completed. In the meantime, I'd like all of you to prepare for this and start informing the citizens. Understood. Rimuru-sama, my executives exclaimed in unison, their voices ringing with enthusiasm. Then let's get festive, shall we?